Adopt Technology's The Elephant in the Room podcast brings you gigantic tech stories that inspire. These are creators, innovators, and change makers. Every episode, our guests embody one of the core values that makes Adopt so different from every other tech company. Much like an elephant, guests on this show are emotionally intelligent and ready to make a gigantic impact on the world. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Pena. Thank you so much for being here. In studio with us, Levy, the founder of Lcubed, an author, podcaster, and speaker. Thank you so much for being here.
Carrie, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
We were excited to have you. You have an incredible story to share about your current role, but I want to begin with your beginnings. And that is, you started in tech, but it wasn't by design.
Absolutely. I actually hold a degree in electronic media management and thought I was going to direct movies in the future.
Oh, wow.
And that just did not happen because, as you may know, when you graduate from college with a degree in video production, you really can go into news and you can barely earn minimum wage.
I do know this. I do know this for a fact. Yes.
So I took those skills, the things that I learned about producing, and it was the early 90s, mid 90s, and technology was booming. And there was a discipline called project management. And guess what? Producing and project management are the exact same things, just a different industry.
So then what happened next?
I started working for a tech company here in the Valley and built out my skills as a project manager. First thing I had to do was learn how to hire people. So I did a little bit of recruiting because that was the job they were hiring for. But then I learned how to transition that and took on a job as a project manager where we could plan the work, do the work, and wrap up the project and move on to the next one.
You have an interesting career, how it's unfolded, because you've managed to follow sort of an intuitive sense.
Always. Every plan is only as good as it is on paper until it's battle tested, is the cliche. And what I've learned is no plan goes according to plan. And my career was haphazard up until a point of where I actually took full control of it. So yes, I built teams of project managers over the years in IT. I taught them the need to use processes to ensure that we're doing the right work for the right reasons. We used then technology to enable those processes so teams of people could do more with less. It was the big phrase. But underlying all of that was end users getting technology that they didn't understand, they didn't like, and they didn't want to use. And I wanted to do something different. And that sort of led to the creation of Lcubed so that we could help businesses get their people doing the right processes and then enable with the technology.
Why don't you tell the listeners and viewers more about what you're doing with this company today?
So Lcubed was formed from an idea in 2008, 2009, right? The economy was rough. And I was in a point with a career that wasn't going anywhere meaningful. I worked for a company that should have been my dream job. It was a startup. It was here in the Valley. It was growing like gangbusters. And I hated going to work every day. The senior leadership didn't necessarily know what they wanted to do, and they brought me in to help them mature the organization through project management so that we could do things in a repeatable way. And every time we started down that path, they stopped us and changed their mind. And some people would call it squirrel, right? We were chasing the shiny object du jour, and I was ready to stop the insanity. And I walked away from everything that I thought I always wanted. And I created a company based on the belief that if we take some best practices that all industries use, project management, process performance management, internal controls, and organizational change, if we use those across all functions in a business, we can do amazing things. And we've had the opportunity over the last 12 or more years now to prove that here locally in Phoenix and across the country with some of our different clients.
What are some of the clients that you work with?
In the Valley, we've had the honor and privilege of working with APS and SRP. Honor Health is a favorite client, and I have some great stories that we can talk through if we have time. Larger scale, we've worked with American Express. I've worked with the state of Arizona and other state entities around the country, and some really small, cool, emerging companies in smaller geographies that are doing things differently.
Yeah. And you're not afraid of that. I mean, you have an innovative mind, so you don't go into a company and say you got to do something this way. You're looking at innovation,
Absolutely.
but just how to make it all make sense. So when you go into any of these companies, like an Honor Health, and I work with them as well, an American Express, what's sort of the first thing that you look at?
The first thing I love to ask any team that's brought me in is, what do you do? Show me what it is. Some teams will have process flow diagrams that they bring out. Some people will just want to talk it through. Some people will say, hey, well, let me go show you, and we'll go out and watch in real time what's actually happening. How they decide to talk about what they do tells me a lot about who they are and how they run a business.
And then what do you do from there?
Well, then we start to understand and look at what their business process is and how it aligns with their customer. And what do their customers actually want and need? And are they at the center of every decision that business is making? Because if the customers aren't, there's waste in the process. And as we understand the customer journey, we can simplify the business process and we can make a business more effective, more efficient, and they will have higher customer satisfaction and loyalty.
You're successful and your company is doing well. You're an author, a podcaster, a speaker. But at one point in time, as you talked about, you were a woman in tech and you were coming up at a time when women were not the most prominent people in the room. And I'd imagine there were times where you were the only woman sitting at the table.
Being the only woman sitting at the table was a reality for so many women in the early 2000s. I was working locally and I'd been brought into an organization, a financial institution, to introduce project management. I'd spent about 6 months and shown the value of organizing work and knowing the meaning and the impact of knowing what you were going to do, how you were going to do it, and that there was a specific end. We could control time, cost, and scope. As I positioned to become a member of the leadership team within IT, it was very important to me to get the title director. From a career progression, it was just that one of those things. I was just about 30 years old, and that was that title. Mm-hmm. And they agreed. And I was the director of their first PMO, Project Management Office. And as I was sitting around the table with the rest of the IT leadership team, I was the only director and I was the only woman. Within the next 90 days, every gentleman at that table had miraculously also become a director, which is great for them. But I'd fought really hard to bring that title into the environment, and they received it because I had it. As we were talking and having leadership conversations, my boss had a new idea, and I asked some questions about it one day. And you know that cartoon moment when you can see the steam and the eyes roll, and I saw that look on his face, and I went, oh, I've done something really wrong. After that meeting, he pulled me aside and he said, when we're in these team meetings, it's really best if you don't question me. Just kind of go with what I'm putting down and follow my lead. It's what everybody should be doing because I've got the ideas. Like, oh, I'm there to be seen and not heard was, what was screaming in my head. We went through that experience for several months, and I was testing ideas with my peers. And I said, what do you do when you have an idea? And they're like, I don't do anything with it. And I wasn't happy with that answer. So I started planting seeds with my boss of these ideas. And over time, slowly, he would take them and we'd make them real as long as they originated from his mouth in large group settings. I did this for 5 years. He was promoted 3 times to the CIO of the organization. None of those ideas were his. I had it. I left. Because I was the only woman and I was not allowed to have an opinion, a point of view, or heaven forbid, take credit for work the ideas that I brought forward or the results that my team produced.
Don't be a disruptor.
Oh, by all means, don't even speak. Right? Disruption? No. Speaking was bad. That was a hard time in my career because I left a team behind and they were amazing, the best team of people I've ever worked with. But I couldn't get up and go to work anymore. I couldn't not be me. I had for 5 years become smaller and smaller and smaller, and I was afraid I was going to disappear.
Oh, wow. That's really powerful. And how did that inform your next steps in both your career and your life?
From my life perspective, in and amongst that, I divorced and was recreating my sense of self as an individual, not a spouse, just being me for the sake of me. And that was probably something that saved me for a while because the career started to go so sideways. The next career jump was to a startup locally, and it should have been a great experience. But I don't know that I was in the right headspace to make the most of it. But all of those things are what led to Lcubed. And we can't rewrite our past. And in the moments, there were some bad ones. But they all led to where we are today. And today is pretty awesome.
What was it that allowed you to embrace your full story and feel great about it?
The pandemic. The last 2 years changed how I think about everything. I had, for the better part of a decade, led a team and a business that was about delivering results for others. When everything got a little bit quieter and a little bit more introspective because everybody was remote and isolated, I turned my process on myself and on my own business. And in that, created and wrote the book Future Proofing Cubed so that we could really highlight and showcase our adaptive transformation framework, which is that secret sauce of how we do what we do, those 4 best practices I already talked a little bit about. But it also gave me the opportunity to do these types of conversations and to be present in social media and media in general in a way I would never have imagined would be useful, interesting, let alone as powerful as it actually is.
You stepped out and decided to use your voice.
I did. And I love my voice, and it's loud, and I am willing to embrace disruption. Being disruptive became important. 2020, International Women's Day. A group of women had created an online gathering to talk about and celebrate women in business. And I came on and I said, I am so tired of these conversations. Why do we have to showcase and draw the spotlight on women? We're amazing. We know we're amazing. We're doing great things. And yet over and over again, we're highlighting this need to showcase ourselves. We shouldn't have to. And then I started looking at the data and realizing, right, parity. We're 80 years away from actual parity in executive ranks. We are, 2 years ago when this started, there were roughly, and I'm paraphrasing numbers because I didn't prep it, but roughly 41 women in CEO roles in the Fortune 500. This year, we're at about 44. All right, it's progress, but it's really poor progress in the scheme of things. So we do need to have these conversations, and we do need to talk about International Women's Day. And I decided to shout from the rooftops about disruptive women because it was hard to identify who they are. Disruptive men, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, anybody can come up with those names. I dare you to name 3 female disruptors of equal merit. I can come up with Oprah. I'll come up with Lucille Ball because I think she was one of the originals.
She really was.
Wasn't she?
Yeah.
Whitney Wolfe Herd. Okay, starting to get more contemporary, but it's hard. And so I want to shout loud and proud for women to take on roles in leadership, in technology, and to step into their space and use their voice.
And you say that one of your missions is to reduce this feeling of failure.
Yes.
Talk about that.
So failure in American society is a negative thing. And that really is strange when we stop and think about what are the most important failures in life. They stem from the scientific method. If we hadn't had failures, we wouldn't have penicillin. If we, and that's the favorite one, but everything we do in business comes with risk, and every risk comes with a possible reward. And as we're making strategic choices, if we're willing to assume a little bit of risk and consider that everything we do is an experiment, it's an opportunity to learn. Some experiments will do exactly what we want them to do, and we'll do more of them, and we'll make it bigger, and we'll make it bigger. Some things are not going to give us the expected results, and we should walk away from those quickly, but learn from it and apply that knowledge to the next thing we try. I was reading something in the last couple of days talking about this idea of experimentation and how it's not open to everybody. And that was a startling thought for me. A person of color in a lower income bracket, the risk of an experiment failing by becoming an entrepreneur could be life-altering. Whereas that experiment failing for an Elon Musk is just not even something that even registers on his, on his brain is material. Mm-hmm. And so the experimentation mindset, I think, is really important to hold and honor. But I think we also need to do it with care and caution and understand that the impact of the risk is different for every person who's experimenting.
Yes. Talk about that a little bit more, because we've had good discussions on this podcast because we have a lot of tech entrepreneurs and super innovative people on this Adopt Technologies podcast. The co-founder of Adopt Technologies, he's an innovative person. He wanted to put this podcast together and sponsor it because he believes in lifting people up and igniting that innovative spirit. However, for you, as a strategist, I'd imagine that you talk to people about be innovative, light that fire, but also look at it from a practical standpoint. How do you know what the balance is there?
So the balance is going to come from the team, right? A leader empowering people to be innovative. I like to talk about it as turning on an innovation engine, right? Every business needs new ideas constantly coming into the environment, and that is feeding that innovation engine. And as we take these ideas and we get good at creating them, no limits, no constraints, think big, be bold, be crazy, because that leads to brilliance, and that can be the thing that is the game changer. Then you have to test them, and you have to test them carefully. And that means getting a group of people around a big whiteboard and sketching out what that idea might look like when it comes to fruition, and prioritizing and picking ones that have the best impact to your customer, have the lowest risk to the organization, and then grow it a little bit bigger. Test it in a case sample, test it in a larger group. If you're still getting those positive results, grow it iteratively so that you're mitigating risk at each step.
Have you found, since you've stepped into using your voice in a powerful way, have you found significantly more joy in your life because you've freed yourself?
Being open to telling the story and speaking has given me so much joy. I had no idea it was something I ever wanted to do, but standing on stage and telling stories about how my career evolved, how my grandmother influenced my life, and how her passing a month ago was, on one hand, terribly devastating, but gave me that opportunity to reflect on what strong female family members I've had in my life, and to be able to talk about it. If any of my stories resonates and impacts one person, it's so worth being able to tell the story.
Yes. I'm so sorry about your loss. Can you share with the audience just, how did your grandmother impact you?
So my granny she was a tough old broad. Her joy in life was 4:00, pour me a rum and diet, and I'm smoking a cigarette. That is all she wanted out of life. And just over a month ago, circumstances changed and she could no longer do those two things. And very quickly, once she didn't have that, she was gone. But what she gave me in my life, right? A grandparent-grandchild relationship is special because there aren't the expectations and the hopes that we that parents put on children. You're a layer removed, and it is unconditional love, and it is fun. And she and I were, in some ways, Thelma and Louise along the way. And we, had rowdy, raucous times. She was there when I decided to get married very young. And she was there when that marriage didn't work out, saying, well, I may have told you so, but you're going to be okay.
Aw.
Right. And she was a business owner. She owned a trucking company in the Midwest in the 80s and 90s, which is a very non-traditional role for a woman.
Yeah.
And so she set a lot of standards that I wanted to live up to. And I always knew that no matter how badly I messed up along the way, that she would be there with her wisdom and a cocktail and everything would be a little bit better.
What message do you hope the audience can take away from the work you're doing today and what you'll be doing into the future?
I hope that people will take away the idea that we can do anything. We have to be willing to risk not getting the results we initially expect. And that if we work together in collaboration, that, the sum of the whole is greater than the individual parts. And that was a really bad Plato paraphrasing, but right, we are stronger in numbers. And coaching and bringing up women, bringing up people of color, bringing up and bringing the table to be as diverse as it possibly can be so that we have as many different perspectives and experiences represented is imperative to future growth and success of all businesses.
I have found that people in business are a lot more in tune with breaking through silos rather than working in these just far off, isolated spaces. And that seems to be really positive. I like working in a collaborative way. Has that been your experience in recent months? I don't know if this is something having to do with coming out of COVID and the isolation that everyone felt, that there is generally speaking, a feeling that people want to have a more collaborative nature to them.
I think that we have a couple things. Coming out of COVID and the pandemic, the need for interaction, interpersonal interaction, I think is very real. I think that it's dangerous to believe that we need to go back to the office to be collaborative. I think that we've learned some lessons about productivity and geographic boundaries, right? If we're working collaboratively virtually, we can be collaborating around the world simultaneously. And I think there's power in that. But collaboration is the key to everything. I would prefer to not be the smartest person in the room, right? We want to surround ourselves with people who know more and can contribute is critical. And it's important to be okay not being the smartest person in the room. I think that's opens up everybody else to share their brilliance.
Yeah. And to not feel, I've been studying a lot about just removing ego from the equation. I think that's really, for me personally, that's been really beneficial.
I think that it is, right? To be able to, a word we never used prior to the pandemic regularly, to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right? I never had heard that word in a business context without somebody snickering prior to us going in through the pandemic experience, and now understanding that we hear children in the background, we may see them, the dogs, the cats, the birds, whatever it is, right? Life is messy and it's a little raucous and it is sometimes a little bit uncontrolled. And we need to embrace all of that and give everybody the latitude that they need to, business hours 9 to 5, it's been debunked, right? My productivity time may be from 11 p.m. until 2 a.m. And we should let people be productive in their productive zones. But it is important that we find those ways. And your question was to bring everybody together to collaborate.
Yeah.
And it is important because the sharing of ideas is how they grow, they mature, they develop, and they become bigger, better, and more impactful.
Designing your own best life.
Yes.
So as we wrap things up, I just find it fascinating, sitting down and having the opportunity to speak with someone like yourself who you didn't intend on a tech career. You rose up the ranks and then you started to pick and choose where you wanted to go in your life. That's really purpose-driven. How does that feel to live a purpose-driven life?
I've never thought about it in those terms that way. It sounds really awesome when you say it. It feels good because I am now making choices that are meaningful. They are not based on fear. They are not reactionary. They may be based on nothing but a hunch and a whim, but I am okay with a little bit of risk along the way to see what the return and the reward might be.
Well, I love having you here. And where can people learn more about the work you're doing and also your book?
Absolutely. The easiest place to find me is at lisallevy.com. And that'll take you to websites that link Future-Proofing Cubed, the Break Everything in Healthcare podcast, and everything else that I'm up to.
I like that. The Break Everything in Healthcare podcast.
Yes.
That's super cool. I mean, you just, you're kind of all over the place doing really great things.
Trying to be just a little bit disruptive so we can make a positive impact.
Gosh, I love you, lady. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. I'm Carrie Pena. Now it's time to talk about what we've heard with Brett Helgeson, the CEO of Adopt Technologies. Lisa, she's on fire.
Totally on fire.
So many takeaway points. I loved her entire interview. Specifically, she talked about failure and how we internalize the feelings of failure.
Yeah, her mission to reduce the fear of failure, I think, is just incredible. And she's totally right. Everybody, it seems, in the United States is very much focused on failure as a bad thing. Whereas I believe really successful leaders, she being one of them, focus on the fact that through failure, we learn so much more than through success. And I've always been of the opinion that if you don't try, you don't know. And the way that you solve complex challenges is by trying a lot of things, knowing that you're going to fail in most of them. So her mission to do that is awesome. And you can bring that into your personal and professional life.
What were some of your other takeaways from her interview?
First of all, especially in today's day and age, from an employment perspective, it's amazing that people like the people that she's worked for in the past are still in leadership positions, because whenever you have somebody, in her case specifically, that he or she is the one that's generating a lot of these wonderful ideas, and a leader is saying, you don't talk in meetings when we're all there as a group. That's my job, right? You listen to me, and then takes credit for all of the ideas. That's a great way to drive talent out the door, as
Yes.
it did with her. I mean, when you look at all of the surveys on why people stay at organizations, right? Salary is obviously important, but it's way down the list, or at least 4 to 5 down the list.
Yes.
In most of them. It's all about their ability to have an inspirational leader. They feel empowered. They feel like they have a voice in the workplace and meaning and purpose. And you cannot accomplish any of those things if you have a leader like that.
It's soul crushing.
Totally.
You walk into a room and someone's like, I don't need to hear from you.
Absolutely. I can completely understand why she left.
Yeah. And it was their loss.
Totally.
And I know you had one other significant takeaway.
Absolutely. And it's her approach to innovation. And it ties right into the risk of failure concept. The way that she has talked about within organizations going through innovation and trying to execute on really big ideas, and the small pieces of progress, and then sample sets and surveys and testing that you do, all of those things really mitigate risk in the long run. And actually, I want to bring one other thing into this, and that is her comments about how the risk of failure, especially when you look at different entrepreneurs of different demographics, how that risk has such a different effect on people. And when you consider that, there is so much work to be done to make sure that you help give all of those individuals that may lose everything when they take a risk, whether it's starting a business or something else, and help shore them up from an education, a financial, and other perspective, because there are a lot of problems when it comes to minorities, as an example, and what kind of access they have to, whether it be financial or educational and other programs that help them succeed.
We are making our way through season 1 of your podcast. And I'm just wondering, we've had so many incredible guests. Each one has told a different story about diversity, inclusion. Some of them have told stories that were, amazing to hear, the way that they've been discriminated against, not heard. that's the whole point of the podcast. I mean, just in general, how do you feel about putting on a show like this and raising up these voices?
First of all, it's amazing to have talent like you and all of these wonderful guests that we've had on the show, because there are so many inspiring things that they share. And it's really eye-opening to hear the stories and the types of challenges that they've overcome and the experiences that they've had in the world. And that's the type of thing that we want to bring to everybody's attention, because if you don't bring those things to the light of day, there's no way to get beyond them and actually correct those things.
That's absolutely true. And I'm so proud of the work we're doing on this show. We thank you so very much, Brett.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for listening and watching. I'm Carrie Pena.